If everyone could join me, if we welcome our very own anointed Pastor Tony Ayers.
Thank you, my brother. I don't think we even noticed. Amen, amen. Can we all turn to Isaiah chapter 40, verses 1 through 8. And let me give you some background. The prophet Isaiah is one of the 4 major prophets, amen, that wrote 5 major books. Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, and Daniel. Jeremiah wrote two books, 4 prophets, 5 books. Isaiah is known as the eagle-eye prophet because not only did he prophesy into the future, he prophesied all the way into New Jerusalem, into thousands of years in the future. Amen. Isaiah was probably the most quoted prophet of any time where Jesus was speaking. Jesus quoted Isaiah probably more than anybody else. And then another interesting fact, there are 66 books in the Bible, and there are 66 chapters in the book of Isaiah. Interestingly enough, the Old Testament, there are 39 books. In the New Testament, there are 27. In the book of Isaiah, he prophesies against Israel and warns them, hey, you're about to get spanked for 39 chapters. But then after, this is what God does to you. God will warn you and he'll give you all kind of rough messages. Hey, stop that, stop that, stop that. But then once you fall into the hole and once you get yourself in trouble, just the same way that we are as parents, once the kids are already in trouble and there's no sense in coming down to the jail and beating them up at the jail. You see what I'm saying? They're already in jail. Amen. So there's no sense in being nasty once they are in trouble already. So in the last 27 chapters of the book of Isaiah, for most of those chapters, God is encouraging and God is saying, okay, this happened, but look what's about to happen. And he begins to prophesy and sends words of encouragement. So that first 39 are warnings. Last 27 chapters of the book of Isaiah, for the most part, are encouragement. So chapter 40 is a pivotal chapter because it's like a swing chapter in the book of Isaiah where he begins to say, okay, yeah, you're in captivity now, but basically look at what's about to happen. And this is Isaiah chapter 40, beginning with verse 1. Comfort ye, my people, saith your God. Speak ye comfortably to Jerusalem and cry unto her, that her warfare is accomplished, that her iniquity is pardoned. For she hath received of the Lord's hand double for all her sins. He's basically saying, it's already happened. The spanking has already occurred. The voice of him that crieth in the wilderness, prepare ye the way of the Lord. Make straight in the desert a highway for our God. So every valley shall be exalted, and every mountain and hill shall be made low. So let's pause. What is he saying there? The things that are so strong here on this earth at the time will be brought and will be humbled. Amen. He's saying that everything that is down and low on this earth right now will in time be exalted. And the crooked shall be made straight, and the rough places plain. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. For the mouth of the Lord hath spoken it. The voice said, cry. And he said, what shall I cry? All flesh is grass, and all the goodliness thereof is as the flower of the field. The grass withereth, the flower fadeth, because the Spirit of the Lord bloweth upon it. Surely the people is grass. The grass withereth, the flower fadeth. But the word of our God, shall stand forever. Amen. You may be seated. May the Lord add a blessing to the reading, to the hearing, and to the practical application of his holy and righteous word. I wanted to tell you the story of a woman by the name of Fannie Lou Hamer. Was a woman who was a sharecropper, and she had been ripped off and taken advantage of down south because she was a black woman and did not have anyone to advocate for her in the time and no one to speak for her. So she began to be part of the civil rights movement, and she began her testimonies and her speech became more and more popular, more and more rousing to people as time went on. And it moved to 1964. In the summer of 1964, it was called Freedom Summer. And during Freedom Summer, many people in Mississippi did not feel like the Democratic Party at that time was doing anything for them or speaking for them. Amen? And when people felt like there was no one speaking for them, what they did is they created what was called the Mississippi Freedom Party in 1964. And in that Mississippi Freedom Party, it said basically the Democratic Party don't want to speak for us, we're going to create our own party. And what the Democratic Party did is they said, hey, we're going to invite you down to speak your party who you feel like you're not being represented. We're going to invite you down to speak to the Democratic Party during the summer of 1964. And Fannie Lou Hamer was invited to testify of how she had been taken advantage of and how she had been mistreated because she was a black woman in Mississippi. And she's invited to speak. And at the same time, in the White House, there was a man who was a Democrat, and his name was Lyndon Baines Johnson. Now you gotta have to stop. Anyone who's read history books now, we kind of look at it now because Lyndon Baines Johnson wrote and signed more civil rights legislation than anybody probably in the history of anyone since. But at the time, and we also kind of look at the Democratic Party as the party of the people, with a lot of black people, a lot of Spanish people, a big umbrella. Well, you have to think, at that time, the roles were almost reversed, where the Democratic Party at that time was the party of the South. The Democratic Party was called the Dixiecrat Party. It was the total opposite of what it is today. Many of the people who were segregationists were from the Democratic Party in the summer of 1964. Okay? And Lyndon Baines Johnson, this is before he signed all that stuff. And at this time, to be honest with you, Lyndon Baines Johnson came from such prejudice that when we discovered the tapes of Lyndon Baines Johnson in the White House, he had N-word Tourette syndrome almost. Where every other word that he was saying out of his mouth was the N-word. Like, that's the background of Lyndon Baines Johnson. So Lyndon Baines Johnson also is a master politician. And he realizes, and he has already heard one speech of Fannie Lou Hamer in another setting. And now he knows that the Democratic Party is going to have on a national platform this woman who has this powerful testimony. And he knows that the whole nation is going to hear what happened to her. And he also knew that it was a little different than Martin Luther King or everyone else. Martin Luther King had these $50 words, had this encyclopedia of vocabulary, and he was this sophisticated person. But Fannie Lou Hamer was going to speak to the people, and a nation that was still largely based on agriculture, and she was going to speak to them as a sharecropper, as a person who was a common person who had been mistreated and treated wrong and been taken advantage of, and she was going to give her testimony on live TV. And Lyndon Baines Johnson, this genius politician, and everyone, regardless of what you feel about him, he was a genius politician where he kind of knew how to work people, he knew how to work crowds, he knew how to speak to certain people, he knew how to even intimidate. Like, even sometimes he would get short politicians and he would bring them into the office and then he would stand over him. He's like, you're gonna do what I'm gonna tell you to do, right? And like he would go in to physically intimidate, and he would do things just to manipulate and control people. He was in a total different level. Amen. So Lyndon Baines Johnson did not want Fannie Lou Hamer to speak in front of the national television set. So what he did was he called a press conference at the same time that Fannie Lou Hamer was speaking. And he comes out to the press conference and says, big news, breaking news, I have something to share. And he says, and he gets in front at the same time Fannie Lou Hamer, so everyone cuts away from Fannie Lou Hamer and her big speech. And everyone, she's shut up, she's silenced. And he goes and he gives a speech, and his whole speech is this. It has been 9 months since President Kennedy has been assassinated. It's been 9 months since I was sworn in. And it's been a long 9 months. And he begins to talk about the 9 months for the 15 to 20 minutes while Fannie Lou Hamer is speaking. And everyone, they had stopped everything to listen to his press conference because this is 9 months from when Kennedy was assassinated, so he had still not picked his vice president. Everyone thought he was going to tell them who the vice president was going to be. But he stood there and he spoke, and he just spoke about the 9 months for the length of time while Fannie Lou Hamer was speaking, so that no one could hear her. Amen? But I want to give you a little bit of good news. Because the reporters who were in the convention hall who heard her testimony, they got together and they said, that was too powerful. You know, what did he just say? He didn't say nothing. He did that deliberately. And the reporters got together and they called the Washington bureau head and they called the New York bureau head and they said, we've got to play that tonight. So what they did was, see, you have to realize when Fannie Lou Hamer spoke, they stopped all the news, they stopped everything, and they were going to give her in the middle of the day. But by Lyndon Johnson trying to shut her up, now what had happened was they shut down the news at night. And what they did was they decided to play Fannie Lou Hamer's speech during the night news that night. So now the audience who heard her was doubled, because you couldn't stop her. Amen? So what the devil intended to shut up in silence eventually was magnified, because it got moved from the lunchtime to the 6, 7, what time did the news get played back then? 6 o'clock. Amen. Got moved to the 6 o'clock news. Amen. I share that with you because even though it's a story about civil rights, it's also a story about our lives. Because, can y'all repeat after me? Can you turn to your neighbor and say, neighbor, the devil is always trying to change the channel. Amen. The devil is always trying to change the channel. Even as early as Genesis, God told Adam, thou shalt not eat of this fruit of this tree. Amen. But guess what? What did the devil do? And he came right back behind him. He said, thou shalt not surely die if you eat of this fruit. The devil is always trying to create an alternate story. And in that alternate story, he's giving you an alternate version of events.